Marshall was flying down the road in his EMT truck. His eyes may have been fixed on the road, but his mind was in an entirely different location. He was supposed to be with Chase right now. Not that he had a problem with Zuma or anything. It's just that if he had to die, he would rather it be by Chase's side. Instead, Sky would be the one by Chase's side and under his protection. Marshall knew exactly what Chase wanted to talk to her about, and he couldn't help feeling a little hurt at the fact that Chase switched him out. Ryder told Chase to pair up with him. Chase had never undermined Ryder's orders before, but now here he was, undermining orders just to be with Sky. Thinking of this caused Marshall to let out a huge sigh. "Marshall. You okay, dude?" Marshall was knocked out of his thoughts by the chocolate lab driving up beside him. "Yeah," Marshall replied. "I was just kinda lost in thought there." "I hear ya. I can't stop thinking about Waki," Zuma said, the worry clear in his eyes. "I'm worried about everyone," said Marshall. "We don't know what happened to Rocky, we don't know what happened to Ryder, we don't even know what's gonna happen to us. Losing Rubble was hard enough, and I just don't know how much more of this I can take." Zuma just stared sadly at the Dalmatian. Marshall wasn't the only one feeling this way. They all felt the same. The walls were closing in, sealing off all hope that might have been shining through the crevices. This nightmare night was taking its toll. "I know what you mean. We didn't do anything wrong. We don't deserve this, any of this," Zuma answered. The drive to Captain Turbot seemed to go on forever. The two couldn't help but wonder how the others were doing. Sky sat outside of the porter's house watching the crows. The blackbird seemed to stare at the cockapoo in an eerie fashion. Sky started to feel slightly uneasy as more crows began to gather and land atop the porter's house. Even though these birds weren't eagles, she still got that certain shiver from them. On top of being creepy, they were still bigger than her. She moved a shaky paw to tap her pup tag. Chase, have you found them yet?" she asked. "No. Not yet," replied the shepherd, searching the house. He looked from side to side. "My goggles picked up 2 heat signatures, but now that I'm in the house, I can't seem to see them anymore," he sighed. "Not only that, but I can't seem to focus. I keep thinking about what might have happened to Rocky. I just wish there was a way to see where he is." An idea suddenly came to Chase's mind. "That's it. Sky. Use my drone. Launch it and tell it to find Rocky," Chase told her through his pup tag. "You should be able to see everything the drone sees on the monitor." Sky nodded and she quickly ran back to Chase's spy cruiser. She looked confused at all the various buttons on the control panel. "Okay. Now how do you work this thing?" she said to herself. She's seen Chase work it a few times, but not enough times to have it completely memorized. She tapped a few random buttons and the holder for the drone extended from the top of the vehicle. "Nailed it," she said triumphantly. "ARF. Deploy drone. Launch," she commanded. The drone shot out from the holder and began to soar in the air, flying in circles. Sky, watching this, tilted her head a little confused. "Why isn't it going anywhere?" She stared at it for a few more seconds before she mentally smacked herself. "Oh, that's right," she muttered out. She remembered that she has to give the drone a command after it's launched. "Find Rocky," she yelled into the air. The drone registered the command and quickly took off into the distance. Sky turned her attention back to the monitor on the back of Chase's vehicle. She watched the view through the surveillance of the drone, looking for any sign or sight of her friend. Back inside the porter's house, Chase was sniffing around the hallways until he picked up a familiar scent. "This is Alex's scent," he said to himself. He followed the scent through the hallway until he came to a hatch embedded into the floor. Chase opened the hatch to find stairs that led to some kind of dark basement. He winced as the smell of burning flesh filled his nose. "This doesn't seem like a good sign," he said, walking down the stairs. "Their scent is strong down here. Were they trying to hide?" Chase stepped onto the basement floor and saw a furnace against the wall. He continued to sniff the floor looking for clues, but the floor was so dusty that he immediately started sneezing. His nose led him to the furnace, where the smell of burning flesh, along with the scent of the porters, was the strongest. Chase got a bad feeling in his stomach as he walked closer to the furnace. He sniffed near the flames and his eyes became wide. He looked around the basement for anything that he could fill with water. He grabbed a nearby pail atop a dusty table and ran to the nearest source of water to fill it up. After doing so, he ran back into the basement and up to the furnace. He doused the water into the furnace and the large flames sizzled out, making smoke cover the room. Chase covered his muzzle with his arm and let out a few coughs. When the smoke began to clear, he walked back up to the furnace and peered inside. It was just as he feared. The furnace was littered with extremely burned and severed limbs that carried the scent of both Alex and Mr. Porter. Chase removed his spy helmet and bowed his head, giving the two a moment of silence. In Chase's mind, Alex was always somewhat annoying, but he didn't hate him, and he certainly wouldn't wish this on him. Alex looked up to them after all. Mr. Porter was very loved by all the pups. He never failed to give them treats, fruits, or desserts every now and then, and was such a kind and gentle man. How am I going to tell Sky that we were too late? How am I going to tell the others that we failed? Sky continued to watch the drone monitor. She could still feel the beady eyes of the crows watching her. The monitor started to get fuzzier and fuzzier. "That's not supposed to happen," she said to herself. It wasn't long before the drone's view completely faded from the monitor. Suddenly, Sky's ears picked up the sound of flapping close by. When she turned her head to look, she saw the crows that were previously watching her take flight into the air, circling just above her. She began to feel even more uneasy as countless more groups of crows joined in. The pitch-black birds swarmed above her like a tornado preparing to touch down. There were so many of them. The sound of heavy breathing reached her ears and she turned around to look behind her. She looked at the monitor in shock as it blinked back and forth from static to an image of Bloodbeard. "Those who gaze upon the moon as I pass, shall soon find that night to be their last." Sky immediately took off running after hearing the voice. The large flock of crows proceeded to pursue her. "Chase! They're after me! I need help!" Sky yelled through her pup tag. "What's happening? Who's after you?" Chase asked, the worry clear in his voice. "It's the crows. They're chasing me. I heard the voice and saw the ghost." Before she could even finish the sentence, Chase dropped his helmet and was already dashing back up the basement stairs and through the dark hallways on his way to the exit. "No, please. Not her," he thought to himself. "Faster. I need to go faster." He thrusted his legs out, picking up speed. Sky was running as fast as her little legs would take her. She tried her hardest to not look back, but when she did, 4 crows swooped down from the flock above her and latched onto her ears with their beaks. They yanked her high into the sky while she screamed, "Eekk." They took her higher and higher. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free from their strong beaks. She watched as the ground had continued to shrink. "Where are you taking me?" she asked them. The answer that she demanded was not given. As the crows soared high above the clouds, they released the cockapoo and she began plummeting to the ground at a fast rate. She continued to scream. Chase, who had just made it out of the front door, watched in horror as she fell from the sky a distance away from him. He sprinted in her direction as quickly as he could. "Please make it! Please make it!" he repeated. Sky could only watch as the ground grew closer. "ARF! Net!" Chase shot out his net towards Sky. Horror had filled him as Sky hit the ground before the net could catch her. "No!" Chase cried out, stopping in his tracks. Sky grunted as pain coursed through her entire body. She felt as though she had broken a few bones. The crows then swooped down in a tornado and surrounded Sky, assaulting her. They continuously pecked at her, accidentally pecking her pup tag, activating it. All the others could now hear her screams through their pup tags. A crow plucked out her eye, while another nipped off her nose. Numerous flocks of crows pecked and pulled off every part of the pained cockapoo. Chase rushed over towards her, tears filling his eyes. "No! Not her! Not here!" he kept yelling. He rushed into the swarm, biting, kicking, and smacking any bird in sight while he tried to reach the cockapoo. The bird's attacks on the female didn't waver, nor did they turn their attention to Chase, or attack him. Chase wasn't giving up. He continued to inch his way through the swarm. He could no longer see Sky. The only thing in sight was a bundle of crows, flapping and pecking their prey. The flock slowly calmed and they began to cease their attacks on the female. Chase ran to the remaining flock that covered where Sky was and released his fury on them, biting, stomping, and pummeling them fiercely. The other crows saw this and scattered away into the sky in panic. Chase looked in front of him and stood shivering. "Sky? Was that you screaming? Is everything all right?" Marshall's voice rang from her pup tag. "Sky? Sky, are you there?" The Dally received no answer. "Chase? Are you THEWRE? Zuma asked the shepherd, as Chase's tag lit up. "Chase? Did something happen? Dude, come on, answer me," he pleaded. Yet he still received silence. Chase just stared as if he was put in a trance. He stared at Sky's bloodied collar. He stared at her flashing pup tag. He stared at her scattered fur and ripped aviator cap. He stared at her no longer visible body. All that remained were her goggles and tiny pieces of flesh. He didn't cry. He didn't whimper. He didn't cringe. He just stared, broken and numb to the world around him. Marshall had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. Why wouldn't he respond? He pondered to himself. Sky screamed like she was in trouble, and what was with all the bird noises? What happened? All these questions and more ran through his mind as he and Zuma closed in on the dock. They looked around to see that Captain Turbot's boat was nowhere in sight. Zuma focused his eyes over the waves in the distance. He was able to spot a ship far out in the sea near a little island with a lighthouse. There. He's on Seal Island, said Zuma. Hop on my hovercraft. We'll have to cross the ocean. Marshall gulped. For some reason, crossing the ocean on a night like this just didn't sit right with him. He jumped out of his EMT truck and slowly walked over to the hovercraft. He hesitated for a moment. What's wrong? Zuma asked him. Nothing, Marshall said, shaking his head. He decided to push the thoughts away. I can't waste any more time. Marshall reached out his paw to Zuma and the lab helped him into the back seat of the hovercraft. Once Marshall was seated and buckled in, Zuma took off, picking up speed across the sand and zoomed off into the ocean. The two watched the waters and how the blood moon reflected on the surface of it. Even on a night like this, all seemed calm with the ocean. Despite the situation, seeing this calmness within the ocean relaxed Zuma a little. He loved the ocean, and the serenity and peace within it always calmed him down. As Marshall stared at the reflection of the blood moon, he noticed something disappear around the borders of the moon. He looked to the sky and noticed something that he hadn't before. There were red stars surrounding the moon, 4 in total. The red stars were tiny, but still noticeable. "Zuma, do you see that?" Marshall asked Zuma, causing him to look up. "Yeah. That's the blood moon, remember? It's been there all night." "No, not that. I'm talking about those tiny stars going around it," Marshall said, pointing. Zuma squinted his eyes looking closer, and he did indeed see the stars. "I see 'em. They're wet. Just like the moon," replied Zuma. "Not only that, those 4 stars are the only red ones in the entire sky," Marshall added. "What do you think it means?" Zuma asked. "I don't know," answered Marshall. The hovercraft began to close in on the island. After riding on shore, Marshall and Zuma hurriedly jumped out of the hovercraft. They stared at a ship floating near the shore a distance away from them. It was the same ship that they were supposed to have the Halloween party on. Marshall, taking the quiet scene in, felt an unusual chill. "Something just seems eerie here," he said. "What do you mean?" Zuma asked, turning to look at him. "It's just so quiet. Too quiet. It makes me feel uneasy," Marshall answered. Zuma proceeded to walk over to the boat and Marshall followed behind. They walked up the wooden ramp of the ship and onto the deck. Decorations from the party they were supposed to have still hung around the ship. The two approached the back end of the deck and knocked on the entrance door to the inner parts of the ship. No one answered. Zuma decided to pull on the door to see if it was unlocked, and surely it was. He opened the door and they walked in. The inside of the ship was actually bigger than it looked from the outside. There was even a wooden staircase that led down deeper into the ship. Tiny lanterns were hung on the walls. "Captain Turubit," Zuma called as they carefully inched down the creaking stairs. "See Cap and Turbot," Marshall called as well. As they walked deeper down the stairs, they noticed that the lower part of the staircase had no lanterns on the walls. Near the bottom of the stairs there was a dim light coming from around the corner. The two could hear noises, as if someone was chopping something up. Marshall and Zuma gulped. "See Captain Turbot," Zuma called as they walked down the last of the stairs. "In here, guys," called the captain from around the corner. The pups were relieved and surprised to hear his voice. Once they had gotten to the bottom of the staircase, around the corner was a small kitchen area. "Wow, Captain Turbot, I didn't know your ship had a secret kitchen," Zuma said, looking impressed. Captain Turbot had his back turned to them while he stood chopping something on the counter. He chuckled. "Well, there's a lot of things that you don't know," he answered, his back still turned to them. Captain Turbot, we really need you to come with us," Marshall said, interrupting the small talk. "This is going to sound crazy, but there's this ghost pirate that's going around killing everyone." Captain Turbot chuckled once more while still chopping. "Oh, I wouldn't find that hard to believe," he replied. The two pups found his behavior to be very strange. He continued to chop the unknown object. This made Marshall curious, and as a result, he began to slowly walk forward to get a better view of what the captain was doing. As he walked past the side counter, something caught his eye. He quickly looked over and gasped. Captain Turbot's orange knitted cap laid on the floor in a crimson trail. Marshall, eyes wide, began to shiver. "ZZ Zuma!" Marshall whispered out. Zuma walked over to where the Dalmatian stood. "What's wrong?" he asked. The lab soon got his answer as Marshall pointed in the direction of the cap. Zuma's heart stopped. "See, Cap and Turbot, why is there blood on your cap?" the lab asked, spooked. The captain didn't reply. He just continued to chop while humming in an eerie fashion. Marshall and Zuma slowly walked to the cap and peeked behind the counter. Behind that very counter laid Captain Turbot. The two pups' stomachs grew weak as they struggled to hold their vomit in their mouth. Looking at Captain Turbot, he had been completely dissected. His innards were splattered out with a few organs still being connected to his body. As they gazed at the gruesome and horrific sight, they could still hear the other Captain Turbot humming and chopping on the cutting board, until his head turned around 180 degrees to reveal a red pupilless eyeball and an expressionless face. Marshall and Zuma screamed, holding onto one another while he continued to hum and chop down on the now visible object. It appeared to be a heart. A human heart. The two pups wasted no time in bailing. They quickly ran out of the kitchen and fumbled up the staircase. The ghost didn't seem to be chasing them, but that fact didn't slow them down. They exited the ship, dashing down the ramp, but Marshall tripped and tumbled down the wooden ramp and into the sand. "Marshall!" Zuma called. Making his way down, he helped him up after reaching the bottom, and the two made way for the hovercraft. They were in such a panic that when they hopped in, they didn't bother buckling up. Zuma started the hovercraft and took off in the ocean, heading back towards the town. The ghost pirate appeared on the shore that they had just left. "Those who gaze upon the moon as I pass, shall soon find that night to be their last," he said before vanishing. Zuma's hovercraft hummed as it raced across the water. Moss Hall, he was, gutted, like a fish. Zuma couldn't believe what happened to Captain Turbot. He and the captain had a lot in common when it came to the sea. They both shared a deep interest and love in it. Now the only person he could relate to about such things was gone. The chocolate lab felt tears slipping down his cheeks. Marshall, noticing this, gave him a gentle hug from behind. He couldn't find the words to say. Marshall let go of him as both of their ears picked up a splashing sound behind them. Marshall gasped and quickly turned around. His body froze upon what he saw. A giant black fin heading towards them at great speed. "Zuma! Zuma!" Marshall called, shaking him. As Zuma turned around, the fin sunk back into the ocean before he could see it. What? Was it the ghost pirate? Is he still following us? He asked Marshall, panicked. It was a giant shark. It was following us. Marshall answered, looking equally terrified. A shark? We've never seen a shark in this ocean before, said Zuma. I didn't actually see it. Just the fin, but I'm sure that's what it was, answered Marshall. Zuma looked side to side of the hovercraft, but saw nothing. Keep an eye out for it and hang on. Zuma pressed down on the gas and sped the hovercraft up. Marshall, although scared, did as he was told. When he looked upon the waters, all he could see was the red tint and reflection from the blood moon. He wouldn't give up. He narrowed his eyes and concentrated hard from a distance, watching behind them. The shark suddenly sprung out from the front of the hovercraft. Whoa! Zuma was able to duck just in time as a great white shark jumped up before snapping at him and completely diving over the two. Marshall wasn't exaggerating when he called the shark giant. In fact, calling it giant was a complete understatement, though the two have never really seen a shark up close and personal like this. The great white dove back into the ocean, creating a massive shockwave on the surface of the waters, creating waves that shook the hovercraft violently. That thing was huge, Zuma said, trying to gain back control of the craft. Marshall didn't say a thing. He just laid low, covering his head while his teeth chattered. Marshall, can you see it? He called out. Marshall shut his eyes tight and continued shivering. Moz Hall. No. I'm too scared. I don't want to get eaten, Marshall whispered. Zuma scoffed at the situation that they were put in. This didn't look good at all. Marshall, please. I need to focus on getting us back to the shore safe. I need you to keep looking out for Zuma's sentence was cut short as the ginormous great white tore through a part of the hovercraft with its powerful jaws. The craft, now damaged and unbalanced, began to capsize over into the ocean, taking both pups down with it. Marshall struggled to breathe as he was already quickly running out of air as he sunk deeper into the crimson-like ocean. Zuma watched as the Dalmatian began to slip out of consciousness. Thinking quickly, he wasted no time activating his pup pack and oxygen mask and made straight for Marshall. He grabbed Marshall around the waist, removed his own oxygen breather and gave it to his drowning friend. Zuma adjusted the breather on Marshall's mouth before activating the jet propeller mode on his pup pack and heading towards the surface. Stay with me, dude. We can't lose you. Zuma looked around for any sign of the titanic beast, but he couldn't find even a trace of it. Where'd that thing go? Something that big shouldn't be able to hide. Unless... Zuma looked below him and surely enough a wide mouth with sharp teeth was speeding toward him from the deep. He was able to dodge the massive jaws just in time and swam to the surface. Still toting Marshall, he quickly made his way for the beach shores. Just a little closer. Why can't this thing go any faster? The tall fin was speeding toward Zuma and the safety of the shore seemed miles away. Zuma's legs were starting to get tired, as he had been kicking them to swim faster in tandem with his pup pack. He continued to hold on to Marshall tightly. His breathing was becoming heavy, but he focused his eyes on the approaching shore. I won't give up. Not with Marshall on the line. Zuma bared his teeth and kicked his legs as fast as he could, greatly increasing his speed. Soon he was able to create a wide distance between himself and the titanic fin. The great white tried to shorten the distance by lunging at the lab, but missed. The force of the shark crashing into the water next to Zuma caused a wave to form and pushed Zuma and Marshall the rest of the distance to the shore. Marshall slipped out of Zuma's hold and both of them landed in the shallow water. Marshall coughed up water and slowly opened his eyes. Huh? Where are we? Where's the shark? He asked, looking around. We're back on shore, Zuma answered. He was lying in the shallow water completely exhausted. But the last thing I remember is falling into the ocean. Marshall turned his attention towards Zuma. Did you save me? He asked. Zuma chuckled. Barely. You really need to lay off the pup treats, he said, smiling at Marshall. Thanks, Zuma. I thought I was a goner, he said, looking down. Hey, we're a team, and you're my fiend. I couldn't just leave you dash. The great white sprang from the ocean and onto the shallow water, catching the lower part of Zuma's body in its teeth. Zuma yelled out in pain. Marshall looked shocked. The shark proceeded to try and wiggle its way back into the ocean with Zuma in tow. Marshall! Zuma called out to the Dalmatian, reaching out for him. Marshall snapped out of it and ran to him. Grabbing both of Zuma's paws, he tried to pull him from the shark's mouth. No! No! Marshall yelled with tears in his eyes. The shark was pulling him along with Zuma. Zuma, no! We can't lose you. It's okay, Moz Hall. I'll be fine. Marshall looked at him with wide tearful eyes. If you don't let go, you'll die too, Zuma said, trying to be strong for his friend. Zuma, you have to protect the others. Zuma yanked his paws from Marshall just before the great white wiggled back into the ocean with him. Marshall ran to the end of the shallow water and stared into the deep. He watched as crimson liquid began to surface to the top and let a tear slip into the ocean. In the reflection of the water, he watched as another red star faded out of sight from around the blood moon, leaving only 3 remaining stars. Zuama. His voice echoed across the seas. He bawled and pounded the water mercilessly. Come back, sniffed Zuma. Zuma. As Marshall continued to grieve, he didn't even notice his pup tag light up. Can anyone hear me? Spoke a familiar but raspy voice. Need help. Marshall, need you, downtown. Truck, totaled, Katie, injured, need medical attention. Rocky laid on the ground near his overturned truck in pain. Using his remaining energy, he tried to stand, but winced when he applied pressure to his hind legs. There was a sharp pain that seemed to be coming from the left hind leg. He looked over his surroundings. His recycling truck was definitely in bad shape. The front was completely mashed in. There were huge dings and dents all over the back, and the vehicle was missing a wheel. He was able to spot Katie lying on the ground not far from the truck and began limping in her direction. Katie. He tried to call to her, his voice still raspy. Katie. He gently shook her, trying to wake her up, yet she was unresponsive. Katie, wake up. Still no response. He placed a paw on her wrist to try and feel her pulse. Oh no. His eyes widened. Katie, please don't be. Marshall had left the beach long ago. He was completely broken and vulnerable now, having to watch not one, but two of his friends die. He blamed himself for Zuma's death. If he had kept a lookout like Zuma told him, instead of cowering, he would still be here. Not to mention he would still be there if he didn't have to come back for Marshall. It's all my fault. He got eaten because of me. The guilt was eating the Dalmatian alive, slowly making him go insane. He knew that Zuma always used to say that if he had to go, that he would rather take eternal rest in the deep blue, but the way that he was taken away surely wasn't one that he imagined before. Marshall was at the point where he wanted to escape this night. He just wanted it all to end. I can't take this anymore. I just can't. He slammed his fist on his dashboard. Why us? Why? Bloodbeard. We've never done anything wrong. Tears began to escape him again. Zuma, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. As he continued to mentally beat himself up, his pup tag lit up and Rocky's voice came from the other end. Everyone. I'm sorry. I wasn't able to protect Katie. His voice sounded shaky. I need you all to meet me at the park. Come as fast as you can, it's urgent. Rocky was the first to arrive at the park, as he was the closest one. With his recycling truck totaled, he had to limp the entire way there. He waited for the others, and sometime shortly after, Marshall pulled up in his EMT truck. An expression of total defeat surrounded his features. Chase was the next to come. He slowly disembarked his vehicle, staring at the pink pup tag and collar he held in his paws, not looking up once. Rocky quickly noticed the spirit-breaking expressions on their faces, as well as the other missing members of the party. A grim realization started to seep in. Where are Sky and Zuma? He hesitantly asked. Neither pup could face him or speak. Guys, stop fooling around here. Tears started to fill the mixed breed's eyes. Where are they? Where are they? As the other two bowed their heads in depression, Rocky's answer was confirmed. No. We can't be the only ones left. We just can't. He ran up to Marshall. Marshall, please tell me Zuma's still out there. This has to be a joke. Where is he? He began to shout. Give him back. Give him back. Give him ba ha ha yak. Rocky fully bursted out into tears, bawling freely on Marshall's chest. Marshall places an arm around him to comfort him, trying hard not to join him in his teary parade. It was plainly clear, the pups were defeated, broken, spiritless. In a way, they were already dead. Bloodbeard had won. If there was any chance for survival, the three would have to leave town, and fast. We have to leave Adventure Bay, Rocky said. We have to get somewhere safe. Whether it's Foggy Bottom or Carlos Jungle. We just have to leave. What's the point? Chase mumbled out, still staring at the pink collar within his paw. There was nothing but emptiness in his eyes and voice. There's nothing left for us. Everyone else is gone, even Ryder. The Paw Patrol is over. Even if we survive this night, I don't think I could go on. Just to stop feeling this pain. I'd rather Bloodbeard just stab through my heart right now. He raised his voice. Marshall and Rocky looked at him in shock. Chase, you don't mean that. Marshall told him. Yes, I do. That monster, he took Sky. Right in front of my eyes. Chase was now pouring out tears. After I had just told her how I felt. After I told her I loved her. He fell to the ground sobbing loudly. I just can't go on. I can't live with the images of her death. He covered his ears. I can't live with the sound of her voice. Her voice, begging me, pleading me to save her, and I failed. I failed. I failed. I failed. Chase wailed and wailed, projecting deep emotions. Letting out everything he held in, the moment of Sky's death. Rocky and Marshall could only watch in heartbreak. I deserve to die. I deserve to die. There's nothing left. There's no one left. Marshall had heard enough. He quickly got closer to Chase. He raised his paw and smacked Chase with all his strength. Rocky gasped at this. Chase, confused by the impact, looked up, rubbing his cheek, and saw a teary-eyed Dalmatian before him. Chase, you idiot. You're only hurting us by saying these things. Hurting me. Rocky and me, we both care about you. You have us left. You have me left. Am I not a good enough reason for you to survive? Do I really mean nothing to you? Marshall's expression was a combination of anger, sorrow, and hurt. Chase continued to stare at Marshall in surprise. Why was he saying all these things? Chase couldn't come to any conclusion. Marshall, what do you dash? Those who gaze upon the moon as I pass, shall soon find that night to be their last. All eyes opened wide in horror at the sound of the voice. An eerie wind blew around the three, surrounding them, filling them with dread as it moved all over the park. A tall figure appeared out in the distance and began to slowly walk toward the three, long ebony hair moving with the wind. The figure came closer. It was none other than the ghost pirate himself. Bloodbeard. No. Not now. Rocky's voice shivered as he trembled with fear. As the ghost pirate continued to move towards them, the horrific memories of Sky flashed through Chase's mind. He could feel something burning up inside him. Anger. Sadness. Hate. We have to go, now. Rocky shouted. Before he could even finish his sentence, Chase had already started charging toward the pirate. Chase, stop! Marshall called out to him, but Chase didn't stop. He was locked in a mode of fury and rage. He bared his teeth as he closed in on Bloodbeard. The pirate drew back his arm and swung his hook at the shepherd. Chase dodged the hook and latched onto the murderer's arm with his teeth, furiously biting and clawing at him. Not a sound of pain erupted from Bloodbeard. He began swinging his arm, trying to shake off the shepherd, but Chase made sure to hold his grip. He wanted to make him pay. Pay for killing Sky, pay for killing Ryder, Rubble, and Zuma, pay for everything. Bloodbeard raised his hand and began to strangle Chase, in an attempt to get him off. The pirate's strong grip around Chase's neck caused his intake of oxygen to become thinner and thinner. Chase's vision became blurred. Chase! Rocky yelled. Chase, unable to hold out any more, had let go. Bloodbeard raised his hook and swung it. Crimson liquid drifted through the air, as if in slow motion. Chase was waiting to feel pain, but to his confusion, pain did not come. His vision slowly came back into focus and he saw Marshall standing in front of him, a hook parting his chest. Chase's eyes became wide in shock. Marshall! You! Why? Marshall's response began with a weak smile. Because I really care about you. Chase could only watch as Marshall's beating heart was ripped right out of his chest. His now lifeless body fell to the ground, his white fur stained with crimson red. Marshall! Chase picked up the Dalmatian in his arms and held him, crying as his own fur began to stain with his friend's blood. Rocky watched from a distance, speechless, unable to say even a word. In just a mere second, they had lost yet another friend. Chase lifted his head with even more rage burning in his eyes. He slowly laid Marshall's body back on the ground. You. Chase spoke with a dark voice. You just keep taking away everyone I care about. Taking away everyone I love. He clenched his teeth. No more. I've had enough. Chase charged for the pirate and pounced on his leg. He bit down on the leg repeatedly, but there was no effect. Bloodbeard swung his hook as Chase was trying to move away and cut a big gash on the shepherd's side. Chase winced at the pain, but there was no way that he was going to stop. There was no turning back. Whether he ran or fought back, he knew that no matter what, death would come his way. He continued to attack the pirate, and with each futile attempt, he accumulated more wounds and gashes. Chase. Stop. Just please stop. Rocky screamed within his mind. Chase's body was growing weaker and bloodier. Bloodbeard raised his hook, moving toward him. Is this really the best I can do? Chase asked himself, vision becoming blurry. Am I really unable to save anyone? He closed his eyes. Marshall. Sky. Everyone. Forgive me. Rocky felt his body go cold and numb as he watched Chase's head separate from his body and roll over in the grass. Bloodbeard turned to him and walked forward. No. Chase. Marshall. He stared at both his friends' lifeless bodies. Why? Why did you leave me? He choked up. The pirate continued to walk closer. Rocky's image reflected in the pirate's red eye, and the pirate's hook reflected in the mixed breeds. Without even thinking, Rocky ran out of the park, running down the street as fast as he could while limping, not looking back. He didn't know where to go or what to do. He just ran. He passed by many houses. He wanted to stop and ask someone, anyone, for help, but he knew that it would only put them in danger as well, and he just couldn't do that. He came across an alleyway deep in town and tried to take a shortcut, but was met with a dead end instead. He could hear Bloodbeard's footsteps getting closer, the heavy breathing getting louder. Trapped in the center of three walls, he covered his eyes, shivering. Go away. Go away. Go away. Rocky. Rocky, wake up. Rocky opened his eyes, recognizing the voice. He almost cried. He couldn't believe it. He was back inside the lookout. Ryder, Sky, Rubble, Chase, Marshall, and Zuma were there, standing before his eyes, smiling. You were having a bad dream, Rocky. Ryder told him. The others were silent. Rocky, still in disbelief, bursted into tears. Ryder, it was horrible. All of you were killed by a ghost pirate. I was the only one left. I felt so scared, so alone. I'm so sorry for making fun of you all. I was afraid all along. He wailed. The other pups still remained silent. It's okay, Rocky. Everything's all right now. Ryder stretched his arms out, inviting Rocky in for a comforting hug. Rocky ran into Ryder's arms, embracing him. Rocky felt so happy. Happy to see everyone safe. Happy to know that everything he witnessed was just a horrible dream. As he continued his embrace, a few realizations came to him. For one, he didn't fall asleep in the lookout, he fell asleep in his pup house. 2. he could still feel pain in his leg, and lastly, Ryder's hug, it felt cold. Rocky gasped, eyes shooting open wide in shock. SHNNK. A hook was stabbed into Rocky's back. As Rocky gasped out in pain, he heard familiar heavy breathing. Raising his head up, he looked and saw the red pupilless eyeball on Ryder's face. At that moment, he knew he had been tricked. The setting of the lookout slowly faded away, revealing the alleyway that Rocky had ran to for cover. The one whom he had been embracing was none other than Bloodbeard. It was all an illusion. The murderous pirate had toyed with his mind, leading him to a false sense of security. The ghost pirate moved his face close to Rocky. Nose to nose, he began to speak. "Those who gaze upon the moon as I pass, shall soon find that night to be their last." He spoke without moving his mouth and removed the hook from Rocky's back as the mixed breed started to lose consciousness. Rocky slowly fell to the ground as he watched Bloodbeard walk away. This was no dream, but a living nightmare. This was hell. Is this my punishment? I'm so sorry, everyone. As Rocky hit the ground, the final red star vanished from around the blood moon, and not too long after, so did the ghost pirate. The red tint that covered the moon faded away, revealing a peaceful, yet deceiving night sky.